General Michael Flynn's military career included a key role in shaping U.S. counterterrorism strategy and dismantling insurgent networks in the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. He was given numerous combat arms, conventional, and special operations senior intelligence assignments. He became the 18th director of the Defense Intelligence Agency in July 2012. And he was the 24th U.S. National Security Advisor for the Trump administration. You want intelligence? This guy's got it in spades. This is Inside the Skiff with General Michael Flynn.
Welcome, everybody. This is Inside the Skiff with General Michael Flynn, yours truly, and I really do appreciate everybody coming on here today. I know we're putting this out on all my social media sites as well, streaming it, as well as, of course, here on Patriot.tv. For those that are joining me for the first time, Inside the Skiff is really just a way for me to walk us across the planet here, around the world, in some of the areas and issues that are affecting all of our lives. And I obviously will get into topics of national security, international affairs, foreign policy, as well as the domestic issues that we are affected by on a daily basis. And anyway, I just find it today, this sort of post-Labor Day, and the fact that we are in a crisis situation in the United States of America. There is no doubt about it. And that crisis is caused by this idea that many on the left would say is a human right. And that's this idea of human migration. And human migration, this is the way they would want to, have you talk about it, as human migration is an absolute right that people have around the planet as a human right for everybody, when in fact we also have rights as a sovereign nation. We have rights as citizens of a constitutional republic with a very sound and strong rule of law. And so one of the things that I will talk about here are the issues that affect us here at home, but then as they get translated overseas, because we cannot sit in isolation. And that doesn't mean that we, as America First proponents, I'm an America First proponent. And for those that don't know, America First is not a bumper sticker that has recently come up because of President Trump getting involved in politics in the 2016 timeframe. And I was riding with him then. America First comes out of really World War I. And the idea after post-World War I, this is back 100 years ago, America First was a bumper sticker then, or a phrase that was used then, and it has raised its head periodically over time when we have been under attack. We've been under attack domestically, and when we've been under attack by foreign nations. And the idea about what America First means is that we should take care of our home first and foremost, and then we can go ahead and do all the great things that people of the United States of America do. I mean, we're an amazing country. We're still the most giving people on the planet, but we are suffering. We are definitely suffering from huge, huge amounts of debt. I mean, multi-trillions of dollars of debt. And most of that goes right over the top of people's heads, because it's like, I tell people that, the thing that affects most Americans is what's 50 feet from their door. And what that means is that, like, what does it cost you to go get a dozen eggs, or, to put food on the table? What does it cost you to go buy a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk? Or what does it cost you to go fill up your tank of gas down at a local gas station? So what's within your community? And right now, all of those things with the rising inflation rates that we have that are staggering, and, never mind the cost of food, but also the cost of trying to purchase a home, right? I mean, the whole idea about the American dream was always about home ownership. That was one of the items about the American dream, about home ownership. And then we have all these things domestically that are bombarding us. things like these issues of transgenderism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, the social emotional learning experiments that are going on in our institutions, principally in the institution of the United States military, and certainly throughout the Department of Education, a department that I believe needs to be taken apart piece by piece. And, the unions will go, the education of the teachers unions will go crazy. But I think most teachers would benefit tremendously if the emphasis went back down to the states and returned back over to, parental rights. I think that there would be so many more benefits, not just for our children, but for parents and for those who are educators, who are true educators, and that's all they want to do is focus on that, instead of the big unions that benefit an awful lot with a lot of money that flows back into people's pockets. So that's not something that politicians will talk about, because politicians, they'll want that vote. But this is not about, political correctness right now. And the ideas and some of the things that I've been talking about here over the last couple of weeks inside the skiff, they deal with the realities that we are facing. And if we don't get this right, we are going to go down a completely different path. It will not be an America First path. It will be a path towards socialism and worse, communism. Have I called people out who are in fact socialists? Yes, you bet. And do we have many of them in our government? Yes, we darn sure do. We have people in Congress. We have people in the Senate. We have people in the executive branch. We have people that are part of our government. We certainly have people, large parts of elements of our government itself, the State Department, Department of Defense, certainly the intelligence community, have people that are working principally in and around Washington, D.C., who have socialist tendencies or who are socialists themselves and espouse the idea of socialism. We never would talk like this in America, right? We always talked about Republicans and Democrats. I mean, I've said in the movie that I put out, Flynn, Deliver the Truth, Whatever the Cost. I've said in that movie where, and our family talks about it, where we were Kennedy Democrats. And I'm not talking about Bobby Kennedy Jr. I'm talking about J.F. Kennedy and Bob and his dad, Robert Kennedy. We were Kennedy Democrats, and what we learned, but we were pro-life, pro-small business, pro-family. I mean, that's the kinds of things that we were part of in the upbringing that we had as children and then as young adults, and what my parents got involved in. But as time went on, what began to transpire was that we saw the Democrat Party shifting so far to the left. And when we think about, why is that the case? That's the case because when you start to really take a hard look at the establishment and who is running the establishment, who's actually in charge of it, who do they choose to be a governor of a state, or who do they choose to be a president of the United States? And that's always been the case. And it goes way back. It goes way back, 100 years at least. You have organizations like the Council of Foreign Relations, and really what they've morphed into, they still exist, and there's still many members that are part of it that serve across the government and across cabinet positions on both sides, whether it's Republican or Democrat. And now, since the early 1970s, and what we've seen is the rise of this World Economic Forum, who have taken this idea of the New World Order to another level. And the New World Order is all about globalism. It's all about the idea that we should be one world under one world order, run by a group of people, principally a group of elites that manage the nations of the world, but don't manage them as sovereign nations. Manage them as a part of a one world order, a new world order, a globalist society, with institutions like the United Nations, with institutions like the World Bank, World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization. And then what they do is they basically shove down our throats on a consistent daily basis ideas that are they're so different than anybody can actually imagine. I mean, the idea of transgenderism as an example. I mean, and I'll just use that that's a small example of something that has become such a big issue. And you say to yourself, do people really believe that a person born as a boy, right, born as a male, and can become a woman? And the answer is no, absolutely not. Now, mentally, they might think that that's what they are, right? And now they can be judged for whatever it is that they think they are. And is that a mental health issue more than a biological need, right? And we have people like Klaus Schwab, who is in charge of today. He's in charge of the World Economic Forum. He talks about fusing biological, physical, and digital aspects of our lives together. And they are looking at changing the way we actually are as human beings in those three realms, right? Digital, physical, and biological. And they're forcing that on principally on Western societies, meaning, Europe, parts of Europe, damn near all of Europe, with the exception of a few countries who have really pushed back. And of course, the United States, or I would call it the Northern Hemisphere of the Americas, right? Canada, the United States of America, and Mexico. And Mexico pushes back. The people of Mexico push back a lot more. We don't hear about this all that much coming out of Mexico, except from the leadership of Mexico, right? They talk about it as though they espouse it, but you don't see it being forced into their society, into their people in Mexico. It's clearly being forced here, and it's being done through the institution of education. That's why I'm so anti-Department of Education, because the Department of Education is one of the best funded, our public school education system, one of the best funded in the world. In fact, it's probably more than the next 10 nations combined, and yet we're in like a bottom third percentile of abilities and test abilities, and the idea of the education that our children should be getting in the public school system that spends literally millions and millions of dollars on public education, and you just say to yourself, what the hell? What is it that's happening to our education system? And a lot of it is because we have this political correctness that's being shoved down our throats. And all of this is happening in a political environment that has, I had a great conversation with a friend of mine this morning, that we have turned everything in the political environment to what is the color of somebody's skin, what is their race, right? And that is so wrong. It is so wrong. What we ought to be talking about is the reduction of crime in our neighborhoods. We ought to be talking about the cost of food on our tables. We ought to be talking about whether or not the money that we're spending, that we're being taxed for to go into our kids' education, is actually doing anything. Are our kids getting the education that they deserve in the school systems that they are? And I can tell you that factually, that's not happening. We ought to be talking about whether or not we are going to have a sovereign nation or not, or are we going to continue with this wide open border, human migration, which is the United Nations plan. The Biden-Harris administration has bought into this. They've actually signed up with the nations of Canada and the nation of Mexico with this trilateral agreement that basically allows a free flow of people across all of our borders. Well, it's one thing for Canadians to come down and play, Major League Baseball, or for Canadians to come down and visit family members, or conduct tourism, or to do some basic trade, and Americans to go north and do the same thing, right? That's a bit different than just this wide open border. And anybody that shows up to places like Canada or places like Mexico, which are wide open, talk about the Wild West, wide open when it comes to immigration policies. Ours has opened up in an incredibly dangerous way under the Biden-Harris administration. So if people show up to Mexico from, let's just say, 150, 200 different countries around the planet, this administration is allowing them to just flow freely into our country. Canada is the same way. Now, the challenge with the Canadians, and a lot of people don't know, is that under the Trudeau administration, who's also a member of the World Economic Forum, by the way, as is Macron in France. These are people that were groomed, right? Maybe I'll jump into grooming here because I do like to talk about protecting and defending our children as well. But Trudeau was groomed by the leadership of Klaus Schwab under the World Economic Forum, and he's a big card-carrying member. And of course, he's the Prime Minister of Canada. But in Canada's election system, I think the way it worked out, and I don't hold me to this, but it's close. That Trudeau only won the election with like 35% of the vote in Canada across all of Canada. So he's actually a Prime Minister of Canada without a majority of the electorate, because that's their system. It's the person with the most votes basically becomes the Prime Minister. And that tells you a lot about what could happen here in the United States of America if people don't take voting seriously and get out and vote. So in our case, we do have an electoral system for President of the United States, but I want to talk about that, and I'll talk about, the responsibilities that we have as Americans kind of in a positive way, because I do want to make sure that I cover a couple of issues that are ongoing overseas that are very dangerous right now. This latest memorandum by Russia that they've put out about the adjustment to their nuclear capabilities. I want to talk about that on the backside. So we're in the skiff with General Mike Flynn. Thank you so much for being part of this time, for giving me your time. And I will touch on these and many more issues in the next, after this break. So see you in a little bit.
Sounds rolling. All three cameras. We're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you, and I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Really brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn, one of America's most treasured military heroes. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Go to Patriot TV, click on Store, and grab a once-in-a-lifetime chance to own a treasured piece of American history. And get your own personal download link to watch America's most talked-about movie, as well as a DVD hand-signed by General Michael Flynn. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store. Incredible savings and a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
Yeah, thanks. Welcome back to Inside the Skiff with General Mike Flynn. We're also going live on my X site as well right now. So for those that are joining us on X, welcome, and I appreciate you being here, and thank you so much. We're on Inside the Skiff on Patriot.tv, and I've already done the first segment. I'm going into the second segment, so just kind of give everybody a sense of where we are right now. So one of the things that I've touched on prior are sort of the domestic issues that are in play right now. What I am going to do is talk about some of the global issues that we are facing. And, and I'll shamelessly plug one of the sponsors for Patriot.tv, and that's Kirk Elliott Gold. We are about to enter a a time where we are going to see a global economic shift away from the US dollar as the currency of choice to a digital form of currency. And that digital form of currency, remains to be seen. Is it a Bitcoin? But what does digital currency mean? And what it means is that we are going to move to a much more central bank system. And when you use the word central and you use the word bank together, that implies control. And it almost specifies greater control of our finances and our lives. So the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, there's some discussion right now that maybe the U.S. should actually, if under a Trump leadership, maybe the U.S. should consider joining and leading this BRICS consortium, because it is a powerful consortium. BRICS alone, those 5 nations represent about 50% of the world's population. And we've seen other nations that are now signing up or asking to be included in the BRICS consortium. And if the numbers are right that I've seen, upwards of about 20 plus nations, that we're looking at about 80 to 85% of the world's population that is going to be part of BRICS, this BRICS economic and military consortium. What they are looking to do is they're looking to change the economic system, and they're already in the process of doing that. And I want people to understand this, that this is happening, and the United States of America is not taking the leadership role that it needs to take. It is taking more of a backseat role. I do want people to understand that our administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has already signed up to a central bank digital currency. You can go look it up. Executive Order 14067. So it's not some made-up conspiracy theory. It's actually a real thing. Executive Order 14067. And there are people that are moving our system, our government, our banking system more to this centralized digital currency system. And so, inside the skiff, one of the things that I like to do, because I like to stay at sort of strategic levels, I'll get down to tactics when and where necessary, but the strategic ebbs and flows that are working against our way of life are huge. And they're both foreign, right? But there's also domestic components. And those domestic components are things like the Federal Reserve, things like the corporate banking system, not these small mom and pop banks who they still exist, but they're sort of a dying breed. And the corporate banking systems are taking over ownership. The big corporate banks, many of whom I've been banned from or taken off of. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And so I have personal scars there for anybody listening on both Patriot.tv and also those listening on X right now. And so what we are facing is we're facing a time that America is not in the driver's seat for global economics. And what just recently happened, I want to tie this to a meeting that is going to occur in October. So there's a meeting that's going to occur next month, and it's the BRICS Summit. And this particular summit is headed up by Russia. Russia is now at the head table and running the head table of the BRICS consortium. They are going to have a large body of nation states that are going to be joining them this particular summit. And this summit is going to make some decisions. They've already started to talk about some of these decisions that are coming out. Some of them are going to be moving away from the US dollar as the currency of choice for global trade and moving towards a gold-backed currency, right? So things are traded based on the price of gold. And I think today, I'm guessing a little bit, but today the price of an ounce of gold is about $2,500. And you look back 10 years, you look back 20 years, that number has changed significantly. And I'm told that from some real leading experts in the world of precious metals and particularly gold, that the price of gold is could go through the roof here in the very near future. So these decisions, this decision about shifting our entire global economic system away from the US dollar as the currency of choice to a central bank digital system, digital currency system, is probably going to be made without any real U.S. leadership involvement. And again, go back to it and read Executive Order 14067, where it talks about, this is an executive order signed by Joe Biden, talks about our need to move to a central bank digital currency. I mean, if that happens, we're done as the sort of the global leader of choice. So put that in whatever bucket you want to put that in right now. The second thing, and this just came out on September 1st, and I want to, it's from Newsweek, which I'm not a big fan of, but there's actually 3 different sources that have come out. And the warning comes from the Kremlin, and this is really dangerous. It's a very, very dangerous warning. And the warning is basically the Kremlin is changing its nuclear war policy in response to the West. Okay, so let's talk about the situation in Eastern Europe, principally in Ukraine. First of all, under the Biden-Harris administration, the war in Ukraine is a continuation of the war that actually began while Barack Obama was president of the United States. Mark my words, and I want people to go back and check me on this, okay? The war, after the Sochi Olympics in Russia, which essentially the Winter Olympics in Russia that ended around the latter part of February of 2014, Russia, based on the things that were going on in Ukraine at the time, and much of this was a result of U.S. shenanigans, to use an Irish word, U.S. shenanigans inside of Ukraine to change out the government to a government that was more amenable to the U.S. administration of Obama. That is when Russia first attacked into eastern Ukraine, into the 2 Donbasses or provinces or states, however you want to refer to them, and into Crimea. So this was late February 2014. President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden, everybody can go back and look at all the stuff that happened at that time. That is when Russia attacked into eastern Ukraine. So this didn't happen under just Joe Biden's watch. What has happened under Biden-Harris administration, because what Trump was able to do is he basically stalled everything. And they were going to negotiations, and there was an amenable approach to how to solve that problem. And all that was going on while Trump, and I know this personally, was being beat up about the head and shoulders about his relationship with Russia, which is total BS, absolute BS. That was all based on a lie. That lie has only been compounded, multiple times since it all began back in the really 2015, 2016 by Barack Obama. So I want people to understand, because when we come back after a break here, I'm going to talk about the situation in Ukraine and this warning by Russia, warning that they are going to change their nuclear war policy. That's a first, folks. And when they do that, that means that we, as the United States of America, are going to have to relook our policy, and we're going to have to relook our entire nuclear footing, our nuclear wartime and our nuclear capability footing. What is our stance to be able to defend against something that is so dramatic? We've never really talked like this, only a couple of occasions, and I'll speak to those occasions when we return after a break here. So welcome to Inside the Skiff. Appreciate all of you that are attending from both X and Patriot.tv subscribers. Pay attention to our ads here, because this is how we continue to operate at Patriot.tv, and we'll be right back after a couple of minutes of break. Ladies and gentlemen, this is General Mike Flynn, and I'm inviting you to join me on September 4th at 4 p.m. Eastern. That's September 4th, 4 p.m. Eastern. Mark that on your calendars. We'll be live on Patriot TV. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking only to our Patriot TV defenders for an exclusive discussion, a Q&A, if you will. Your presence is crucial as we dive into the matters that shape our great nation. And again, this is only for the Patriot TV. So if you go to Patriot.tv, you can register today. There's a banner at the top of the website. You can sign up for September 4th, 4 p.m. Eastern. Together, let's stand strong for America's future. God bless you and God bless America.
Access to these events will be members only. So go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member. It's fast and easy. Become a member today. Just go to patriot.tv, click on Become a Member, join today.
Okay, welcome back, everybody, to Inside the Skiff with General Mike Flynn here on Patriot.tv. I'm also streaming live on X right now, and I appreciate all the folks that are on X, probably a good-sized audience on X here this morning. I was talking about, before we took the break, I was talking about nuclear war. And when we talk about nuclear war, that's the most devastating type of physical war that we could ever experience, and so let me give a little bit of background on my experience, right? And what do I know about this issue? So, as the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, I of course would have access to a lot of things. I have full access to our triad, right? Our bombers, our submarine fleet, and of course our land-based missiles. I have access to the types of information that's going on between the various dialogue from the START treaties to the START talks to all of the other things that go on at a very strategic level. That's as the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Down below in some of my previous jobs as a military officer and as an intelligence officer, I also had experience with organizations and units who were responsible for some of these things, for actually the tactical operation of actually launching or disassembling or searching for, right, and trying to discover these types of things. At the higher level, when I got into the National Security Advisor's position, even though I was only in there for a short period of time, I actually was read on with the President of the United States to the entire nuclear code system, right? So I'm not somebody who's, having to read something on the internet and making this up. When we talk about the use of nuclear war or nuclear capabilities, and this latest thing that's out there, it was put out by the Kremlin on September 1st, and I think it came out of the foreign minister of Russia. When they are talking about changing their policy, you really have to take a hard look at, number one, what was their previous policy, right? Is it no first use? Is it sort of waiting until you see the whites of their eyes, so to speak? Is it first use policy? What's the classified? What's the unclassified? When we go back and look at events like the Cuban Missile Crisis, where there was an attempt by Khrushchev at the time, maybe to put some type of nuclear capability on Cuba, on the soil of Cuba. All the use of subsurface, meaning submarine capabilities. How far off the coastlines do they come? Aircraft that fly overhead. The Open Skies Treaty. There's all these things that matter that we have to look at. And we also have to look at, so that's sort of from the enemy's perspective, right? Because when you're doing mission analysis, when you're analyzing these kinds of big issues, you have to look at not only what your enemy is up to and what their ideas are, what their uses are, what their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, their strengths, what's their posture, what's their disposition, what is the composition, what are they made up of? But you also have to look at ourselves. And we haven't had a lot of practice in this realm, right? We should have a nuclear capability that is second to none, that gets routinely exercised, that gets tested periodically, because what you don't want to do is all of a sudden somebody goes up, we got to use this capability, and you find out that the bolts to the silo are bolted, are welded in because somebody welded it shut years ago, because everybody figured, well, what's this hole in the ground, right? I don't want to be too kidding about this because it's such a serious issue. But when Russia talks about changing their nuclear policy and issues a warning. Now, it has to be taken seriously. We should be talking about this in all of our major media networks. I mean, because we just had Russia and one of its combat naval components sitting in the harbor and off the coast of Cuba, and they just did a port call in Venezuela not too long ago, probably within the last month, with combat naval vessels. So that, again, that's the enemy disposition and enemy composition and what they're up to with capabilities that are very powerful. And we now have to look at our own capabilities. So that's just sort of the tactical operational level. Now we have to have the strategic conversation, folks, and say to ourselves, do we have competent leaders in the White House that are awake 24/7 and ready to and understand what it is that we have to be able to do, have exercised this capability? I mean, exercise it routinely. And when I say exercise it routinely, when I was over in the Pentagon as the senior intelligence officer for the Department of Defense inside the Pentagon, I was the senior intelligence officer for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and for a year, I myself and the head of operations on that team, on that joint staff, we exercised on a daily basis the entire system. We would do it. We would never, and this is during the Obama administration, we would never get anybody from the Obama administration to participate, ever. I mean, it was insane. And we would ask, we would say, hey, do you guys, and so because people, they look at these issues like nuclear capabilities and they say, it'll never happen. Well, I'm telling you, Russia has warned the United States of America and warned the West, the more you encroach on their frontier, on their sovereignty, the more that they are going to look at everything and examine all of their capabilities and how do they protect their own national sovereignty. So I want people to go back. I won't talk about it here. But I want people to go back and read the Budapest Accords of 1994. Okay? What were some of the conditions from the Budapest Agreement in 1994, where you had, I think it was Mitterrand, Thatcher, you had Bush, who was part of that, and trying to think of the fourth person. It was the French or the German leader at the time. But the Budapest Accords gave a set of guarantees to Russia. Remember the collapse of the Soviet Union, the end of the Cold War, and NATO was much smaller at that time. And there was some agreements and guarantees about not encroaching on the Russian frontier. And here we are, right? Here we are talking about NATO becoming, or Ukraine becoming part of NATO. I mean, if that happens, and what we're looking at is NATO abutting up against the Russian frontier, and then what? Are we worried? Are we really, really worried about Russia attacking across the frontier of Europe? I'm not. Russia doesn't have the capability to do it. They can't even hold their own in a couple of provinces, in a couple of places in eastern Ukraine, and NATO's worried about NATO, a defensive chartered organization, defensive in nature. They're worried about Russia attacking across the frontier. I used to worry about that when they were the Warsaw Pact and they had large formations of forces arrayed against NATO at the time. I used to worry about it. I used to train for it, particularly as a young officer, but now I'm not worried about it. What I'm worried about is the situation of the use of nuclear weapons. That, to me, is a very, very dangerous capability. And when Russia starts talking about it, and they're not the first ones to talk about it. Actually, we are. Biden mentioned it early on, and probably over a year ago. We've heard the NATO Secretary General talk about the use of what they call tactical nuclear weapons. There's no such thing as a tactical nuclear weapon. Ask the descendants or any survivors that still are around from Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Those were atomic bombs, not nuclear bombs, right? Nuclear bombs are far deadlier than atomic bombs. So when somebody says, well, we can use tactical nukes on the frontiers of Russia, or same, no, that's a falsehood. Many times in the military, we'll use the term tactical nukes. There's no such thing. It's just it's a euphemism to make people think that, that nuclear weapons will only be isolated in one area. Once you unlock that box and you let that genie out of the bottle, all bets are off. So I want people to understand that. So that's just what's happening in Eastern Europe, okay? And now let's take it down to the Middle East. And we see the fact that we have hostages. A U.S. hostage just had a bullet put in the back of their head. We had other hostages from other countries. Same thing happened to them. And yet we're continuing to give money, and we're continuing to kowtow to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. We're continuing to pretend like a peace agreement can be had with Hamas. I mean, this is how Hamas operates at a peace negotiation. When they don't get their way, they put a bullet in the back of hostages' heads, okay? I mean, they don't talk about peace. They actually show what they mean by peace by shooting, in this case, U.S. hostages, okay? A U.S. hostage, and we know that they've already killed others. So when we look at what's happening in the Middle East and what the state of Israel is having to go through, and we look at the billions of dollars started under Obama, and it has continued under the Biden administration, billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars that are going to Iran. That money then flows into their state-sponsored terrorist organizations, the Houthi rebels down in Yemen, South Yemen primarily, who are holding hostage the entrance to the Red Sea and to what's called Bandar Abbas, the straits down there. They're holding all ships going in there hostage, and it's a terrorist organization. It's designated, well, actually, it used to be a terrorist organization. Our State Department used to designate them as a terrorist organization. Under the Biden administration, they took that designation away, and just incredible. The other flow of money goes into Hezbollah. Hezbollah has tens and tens of thousands of rockets aimed at Israel, and it also flows into Hamas. Okay, and we learned that Hamas now has retaken parts of the northern border because as Israel is being really slowed down in their military efforts because they're being, the United Kingdom is stalling on whether or not they're going to give them, they're going to continue to provide them with the weapons that they previously had agreed to. Same with the United States of America. So we have this situation in the Middle East, and I care less about what you think about Jews or Israel or all of the crazy talk that's out there about who's in control of the world. There are people that are dying, and there is a war going on, and the whole reason why this is going on right now, is because of the weakness of U.S. leadership. None of this stuff was happening while Trump was in office. In fact, he was trying to develop the Abraham Accords, right, to basically get a greater sense of peace in the Middle East. And all that has been tossed out the window. So when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit about the Middle East, and then I'm going to bring it all back to what's happening here at home, and give people some counsel about what we need to be doing next. So, thanks to the folks on X that are here with us. The folks that are watching from Patriot.tv, we'll be right back inside the skiff with General Mike Flynn.
Looking to give your wardrobe an upgrade? Well, look no further. Here at God Country & Kin, we've got you covered from head to toe, from shoulder to shoulder, and everything in between. Introducing our brand new Patriotic Collection, designed to display your patriotic spirit with a stylish look that's sure to turn heads. And the best part is, you don't have to break the bank to be your best you. Why wait? Visit us online or in-store today and elevate your style with God Country & Kin. God Country & Kin, where patriotism meets style. Shop now. Visit the Patriot TV store and look for the God Country Kin banner to find the perfect outfit, shirt, accessory, or maybe a great hat.
You can totally see yourself rocking this hat. I know you can. And check out all the great stuff we've got to show your patriotism at patriot.tv.store. Click that link above that says store and join me there at the Patriot TV store.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most precious assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900. That's 720-605-3900.
So welcome back to Inside the Skiff with General Mike Flynn on Patriot.tv. On the break, I was talking to some of the folks that have come in via X and through my X post, and I want to just welcome everybody back. I was talking, a range of issues here inside the skiff from the early part of this episode, talking about the issues around our country and touching on, everything from what the World Economic Forum is starting to do, what the BRICS nations are about to do with our global, the shift of our global economy. I didn't mention, but I will here, that the World Health Organization issuing an international declaration of emergency for health scare for what they call MPOX, and the M actually stands for manufactured. It doesn't stand for monkey. Somebody made up the monkeypox, and that's stuck because of all of the ways that they try to tell us that these things are transmitted by animals. There are some things transmitted by animals, but in this case, these are manufactured like COVID, like the RNA vaccines, right? Those are manufactured in laboratories, principally in China, and then introduced into the world to shut the world down. So prior to this break, I was talking about Russia and the Middle East, and I started touching on what's going on in the Middle East. I mean, these are big, tectonic shifts that are going on globally right now. War in Europe, war in the Middle East. And the war in the Middle East is a big war. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of missiles are flying through the air every single night. The numbers of people that are killed in Ukraine, I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of people. I think that the numbers that do come out are underestimates of the actual number of people who are dying. And I think the same thing can be said about what's happening in the Middle East, that the people that are dying in this war and these endless wars, it's so tragic, the number of civilian casualties. Yes, they do have to stop, but there also has to be a legitimacy given to any kind of discussions or talks about peace. So, and when I say legitimacy, you can't put a bullet in the back of a hostage's head and then go to the peace table and say, give us peace. We want peace. It just doesn't happen like that. Should not happen like that. And the United States of America needs to show greater leadership. So let's take it back to the U.S. in these last few minutes that we have. One of the things that I want politically in the political discourse of our country is I want a greater focus on the things that we can do as a nation. We can, with the commitment of the American people, with the commitment of leaders in our political class, like the President of the United States or the governors of our states, we can reduce crime in our country. We can reduce the scourge of drugs on our streets that are killing our children and we're talking over 200,000 deaths from fentanyl alone, which is a Chinese-made, Mexican drug cartel introduced weapon system. So we can lower crime. We can lower the price of a dozen eggs or a gallon of gas or a loaf of bread or a gallon of milk. We can lower those prices. We can bring the American dream to many more Americans, by reducing the cost of living, reducing the cost of home building, reducing the cost of so many things in our lives by strengthening our economy. And how do we strengthen our economy? And people will say things like, well, we need to return manufacturing to the United States of America. Well, yes, that's true. That means that we have to retool a lot of the industries, and that retooling is going to come at a cost. And that's where there's got to be a partnership between government and the private market of innovation that's out there in our country. But I actually think one of the ways that we can quickly become a nation that is basically thriving again is we have to become energy independent. I'm a huge fan of the United States of America becoming energy independent. We have all forms of energy in this country, everything from clean coal to nuclear energy. We clearly have fossil fuels and shale oil or natural gas. I mean, wind energy, and maybe I'll spend another day talking about energy just in general in the Inside the Skiff on another show that I have. In fact, I'll probably do that because I want people to understand all forms of energy matter. Some forms are stronger and better, and where we are right now as a nation, we can rely on the energy resources of the United States of America to make our country great again, to thrive again. And with those industries, with those energy industries, which benefit so many people, they'll clearly benefit and strengthen our middle class in this country, which has to be retooled all by itself. I think what COVID did, and the scourge of COVID, it destroyed, it really took out a big chunk of the middle class because it destroyed small businesses. I think the number that I saw was about 30% of small businesses never returned after what happened with COVID and all the various mandates. So energy independence to strengthen our economy, reduce crime on the streets of America. We have to stop the flow of illegals coming into this country. I mean, we don't even know what the true numbers are. The numbers range from 7 million to up to 15 million that I've seen in some reports that have come into this country in the last 3 years alone. All the talk about having the largest deportation effort in the history of certainly this country, that's all well and good, and it's going to have to happen. How that happens is not an easy overnight thing. These are things that are going to take a long time, and the application of U.S. military, the application of certainly law enforcement, those are going to be things that if you're going to do what I'm hearing discussed, you're going to have to use all of the legal law enforcement and military capabilities, National Guard-like capabilities that this nation has in order to have any effect, have any impact on driving these illegals out of our country. Those are just components. So, dropping inflation, dropping the cost of living, increasing the energy resources that we have in our country, reducing crime on our streets, letting the police, letting the law enforcement professionals actually do their jobs, protecting them in their ability to do their jobs. Don't hamstring them with we use the term rules of engagement in the military. Now, the rules of engagement that we had in Afghanistan and Iraq were just so hamstringing our ability to be able to win those wars. That goes all the way back to the Vietnam War. Well, that same kind of idea is happening on the streets of America, principally in the urban center. So we've got to allow our police to do the work that they're very professionally trained to do, and allow their leadership, whether it's chiefs of police, sheriffs, to be able to do the jobs that they are, in the case of sheriffs, elected to do. So those and in other areas, other topics that matter to people. I mean, the ability to protect our Bill of Rights, to protect the First Amendment, to protect the Second Amendment, to protect all of the amendments, to protect all of the amendments that we have, to protect our rule of law, principally our rule of law, to get rid of this weaponization against what is very clear, it's undeniable, this weaponization against, kind of the conservative right. And this is principally done by our Department of Justice and the FBI. I mean, to rebuild trust between the institutions of government, these institutions of power that have been weaponized, and the American people. That's only going to happen by having leadership that wants to be transparent, that is transparent, that starts to have a conversation with the American people and starts to let the American people know we are going to knock this nonsense off. We're going to relook things. We're going to relook a whole bunch of things. We're going to relook, everything that went on. For example, all of the J6ers who are in prison right now, many of them have not seen the light of day of a judge. Many have not been in a courtroom yet, but they're still serving time in a prison. I mean, the ridiculousness of continuing to hold on to evidence about the assassinations of the 1960s. We've heard President Trump talk about this, before and recently. The evidence that we now know that is very, very clear on Russiagate, the evidence that's clear on COVID, all of the things that matter in our lives. But you cannot start to regain the trust of the American people without showing some transparency and without opening up and actually being honest, very brutally honest in some cases, about how screwed up our government has been for many decades. And when I say how screwed up our government has been, that's not to denigrate our Constitution or our Bill of Rights or how we function as a nation, but it's to rebuild trust in our country between our government and the people that are supposed to be running this government, right? And the last thing that I would tell people as we close here today on Patriot.tv and Inside the Skiff is I want people to think about, how do you serve? I know what service is like. I served our military for almost 3.5 decades, and then I tried to serve again by going back into government. I want people to start reflecting and asking yourselves, how do you want to serve? How do you serve our country today? And I want you to get involved at the local level. That's what I'm asking people to do. Local action will have a national impact. So come on back next week to Inside the Skiff with General Flynn. Thank you, folks, so much for being part of today's show. For the folks on X, thanks very much, and just stand by for a little bit as we close here Inside the Skiff with General Mike Flynn. Thank you, and God bless.
General Michael Flynn's military career included a key role in shaping U.S. counterterrorism strategy and dismantling insurgent networks in the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. He was given numerous combat arms, conventional, and special operations senior intelligence assignments. He became the 18th director of the Defense Intelligence Agency in July 2012. And he was the 24th U.S. National Security Advisor for the Trump administration. You want intelligence? This guy's got it in spades. This is Inside the Skiff with General Michael Flynn.